Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us once again for this interview series. We're really excited today to have Kelley Lowe from Repurpose Savannah. So, Kelley, I'm going to ask you some questions, but I think what we would all love to hear is more about you and then about, of course, the work that you are doing and you all are doing, the fantastic work that you all are doing at Repurpose Atlanta. So, please tell me about yourself and what led you to such an interesting, varied career path. I saw some interesting twists or turns in reading of your on your bio, and someone who with interesting twists and turns myself.
Yeah,
I'm really always interested to hear more about how people got to where they are.
sure. Yeah, it was not a linear route by any
Yeah.
means. But yeah, my name's Kelley Lowe. I grew up overseas, so that's kind of always where I start. My parents both worked with the State Department.
Oh,
So I had the great fortune to live in different countries and be immersed in international communities. And so, moving around a lot, you tend to adapt to new environments and just glean a lot of different perspectives. Um, so I mostly grew up in Europe. So I was surrounded by great art, great architecture. And I ended up going to school for fine art in the US. I had American parents. I'd always, oddly enough, wanted to experience what living in the US was like. So I left Paris for Richmond, Virginia.
wow.
Uh,
Wow.
but I thought it was awesome. I mean, it was a culture shock for sure. Um, just like a very different mentality and way
Right.
of living. And um, but I thought that there was like an interesting dichotomy between what felt like a really like fast paced, quick consumer culture, and then people like really digging deep to have like impactful change and just like really meaningful conversations and projects and programs.
Mhm.
Um, so I stayed in the US and then got my master's degree in the Middle East. And so
Wow.
while I was at art school, I basically noticed that we were making a bunch of artwork, but that we were also throwing a lot into our dumpsters. So I felt very confused and conflicted about the expenditure of resources and time and material to like make art that ends up in a white gallery, and then the same materials, right, just arranged differently in
Right.
a landfill. So I got really interested in the lifespan of different materials. I had a stint in like museum object restoration, right? So focused really on the scientific longevity of certain types of materials. Um, and then I ended up working for the Savannah College of Art and Design. So
Oh, yeah.
I found my way back to the US. But I made my way to Repurpose Savannah actually after kind of during the pandemic years.
Mhm.
Um, Things were obviously changing and shifting uh, all over the world.
Mhm.
Um, and I had a few friends locally that were working for this nonprofit. And, um, I'd always considered myself an artist, but I just didn't really have the ego to do that. And I really cared about science and the planet and sustainability. And like here was this company that was thinking about things really thoughtfully and with a lot of care and a lot of love, and was basically offering an alternative to demolition by deconstructing buildings and then
Mhm.
harvesting all the usable materials, because 96% of a building is still usable for the
Mhm.
most part. I mean, it depends on the condition, but um, and it was a group of like women, underrepresented people who didn't really fit this like standard image of a construction worker, right? So we were all kind of different from different areas with different backgrounds. But turns out we can all use a crowbar and we can all appreciate beautiful construction and our heritage and our built environment. And they needed someone with some like sales experience, which is, I guess, what I ended up having. um, But really what I had was an ability to adapt, to problem solve, to connect clients with product options. And I really cared about the mission because there's way too much valuable material going into landfills as a result of construction and demolition. And in Savannah, especially, we focus on kind of historic buildings, just kind of the nature of the city that we're in.
Of course, yeah.
Like these buildings were made of materials that don't exist anymore, right? The trees were cut down for the most part. Our old growth forests are a very small fraction of what they once were, but those trees still exist in our built environment. And so not honoring them by saving them, by being good stewards for them to allow them to have like a longer life is like a really unfortunate kind of condition of what's happening predominantly.
Yeah.
Sorry, that was long.
Yeah, no, that was really helpful, and also kind of dovetails into my next question. So it's the perfect segue.
Yeah.
And I think I know that I agree about waste and building materials and so many different other ways that we make things in this country, really in this world, to consume. Yes. As consumers. And so I think the work that you all are doing is really valuable. Especially, I really liked what you said about many of the buildings that are torn down in such a historic and old city like Savannah are no longer materials that we use. And so how can we repurpose those? I think that's somehow really beautiful and really a beautiful way to think about the way that we interact with our built environment. So you talked about Repurpose Atlanta, and I would love to dig more into that.
Sure.
And I think it's somewhat obvious the way that you phrased it, which was so poignant and significant. But if you could dig a little deeper, the work that you all are doing at Repurpose Savannah around reusing and recycling building materials.
Yeah.
Why building materials? How do you source them? Who is reusing them?
Sure. So Repurpose Savannah, we're a 501c3 that was born out of a older nonprofit called Emergent Structures that was founded by the chair for design for sustainability from SCAD, so the Savannah College of Art and Design, Scott Boylston. So he and a bunch of other folks in academia, folks in the circular built environment, started this nonprofit to basically analyze the viability, feasibility of circularity with building materials. Repurpose Savannah was born out of that as like a real boots on the ground, real business. So kind of putting the theory and academia into practice. So as it is now, we've been at it for 6 years. So we provide the service of deconstruction. So we, much like a demolition company, will get hired to deconstruct a building at the end of its lifetime.
Mm-hmm.
And then because we are a 501c3, the materials that we recoup for the most part act as a donation to our nonprofit. So it's still kind of a grassroots, it is grassroots. Deconstruction as an industry is not super well known across the US. But historically, it's what we have been doing or have done since the dawn of time, since like humans built things. We always reused things because why not? But it was only after World War II that like all these kind of land moving machines came back, and with urban renewal and it was easier to like remove a building entirely that was condemned to then fix it up, right? Demolition has become the new norm. So it's like not even an industry that's 100 years old. But here we are. Nobody really, people are starting to understand what we do. But to your point, it's challenging to get jobs. And the way that we get these deconstruction contracts or jobs is by property owners caring about their building. A lot of the buildings that we take down have been in families for a while, so there's sentiment attached to them. Alternatively, it's people who have an interest in sustainable building practices, which is not everyone.
Right.
And then also it's people who are interested in the tax deduction. So we've been able to compete with demolition because demolition is faster and cheaper. Right.
Right.
What we do is we carefully unbuild a building. Like, it takes time. It's not 2 days with like a backhoe and the building's gone.
Right.
And like months sometimes unbuilding these buildings.
Hmm.
And so why building materials is because like a third of the world's waste is from construction and demolition. And
Okay.
in terms of like real change that we can make to emissions globally, it's a really important place to start. Most of the buildings in the US are made of lumber, which like reclaimed lumber is one of the most sustainable building materials you can use.
Hmm.
For the first part, it's sequestered carbon, right? The trees are doing the work.
Right.
And then, the embodied carbon is a lot lower than a new tree that needs to get cut down, milled, kiln dried, shipped, packaged, sent to Home Depot.
Yeah.
We are taking buildings apart in Savannah that have reached the end of their life cycle, and the materials are going back into the renovation and sometimes even like full new builds of buildings in Savannah. So, during the pandemic, it was interesting because a lot of supply chains were obviously getting disrupted all over the place.
Right.
But like, we still had wood. It was still there. It's still here. We're only capturing a small amount of it, but we're doing a lot more work. We're gaining a lot more traction. There are 6 cities in the US that have deconstruction ordinances, right? So that kind of mandates that in order to pull a permit, like, deconstruction has to either be done outright or at least considered. Savannah doesn't have that. In the historic district, there's a lot more care and sensitivity about buildings that come down. But there have been some sad stories still, even though like we exist and we're quite well known in Savannah. There still have been some buildings that we've missed because time and money.
Right.
But,
of course.
yeah.
Of course. Thank you for that. I really like what you said about, number one, about the trees are here and will continue to be here. I am a big lover of trees and everything that they give to us. So I really liked what you said about that. I also really find it fascinating that you said something that I didn't realize, but it makes sense, about the third of the world's waste being building materials. We're always developing, right? We're always, cutting down trees or clearing out space for new stuff, which I got plenty of feelings about. But plenty of feelings about. But it's so interesting that you said that. That's an interesting fact to think about how we're always talking about waste, and a third of that being building materials, because we are always building stuff and putting things where, quote unquote, nothing is. That's something that is one of those things that's like obvious but not obvious. So I think that's an interesting tidbit that you mentioned there.
Yeah, it is shocking. You kind of expect to see a dumpster outside of a renovation job, right?
Or yeah,
But
right.
to see dumpsters outside of new construction, I'm just like,
what are you doing?
That was new. Like,
right.
What are you doing?
what are you
design
talking
better?
Yeah.
So, but there are opportunities for us to just get better at what we do. So
yeah.
I try and stay optimistic.
Absolutely. And I'm glad for it. And I'm glad to have an organization like you all that's doing that. Yeah. Why are, it's obvious that both of us are passionate about sustainability and reusing, but I'd love to hear why you're so passionate about reuse and sustainability, and what got you interested in this type of work. You mentioned it a little bit in your story in the beginning, but anything more you wanted to say about that, I'd love to hear.
I think I care about sustainability because it aligns with preservation in my mind
Yeah,
really
sure.
well. And I've just been able to have such rich experiences in cities that have, you know, preserved like cultural aspects, environmental aspects. Um, I just think that like I I care a lot about the world we live in and how beautiful it is. Like I love beauty, and I want us to proceed with care and thoughtfulness. That's just how I kind of operate. It's the, you know, my parents raised me that way. Um, I also have a young son now. I have a 7-month-old baby. And I just like the world to be like super cool. And we have the ability to do it. Like, you know, we were building incredible buildings before we had like electricity at the ready. And now we have all these technologies at our fingertips. I want more. I want better. I don't know that I don't actually want more. I just want different a little bit. Um, I'm just a caring person, Eric. I just don't know. I just care a lot.
Yeah, no,
um,
you can tell that. And also, we're two moms with young kids. I have a 3-year-old.
yeah,
Well, we'll be 3 in a couple of days. And I feel the same way about my work. I feel the same way about the environmental justice work that I do. I just want her to be in a world that has beauty and is not wasteful, and but is also just, and for us to care a little bit more about the
right.
place that both of our kids and the
Yeah,
generation is going to inhabit long after us. So
yeah.
I feel that very hard.
There's there's a lot of wrong that goes on, like especially in demolition. It's not only that the building materials are getting wasted, but it's like when you crush a building that's full of potentially toxic materials,
Of course,
all
yeah.
of those are going into the air or into the water or soil. And more often than not, the buildings that are getting demolished are in disadvantaged communities. So especially in Savannah, you can see that like where this is happening, it shouldn't be I mean, it shouldn't be happening anywhere, but like
Right.
it's almost, yeah, it's not good.
I mean,
Uh,
and I think that that is where our two worlds collide, I think, right? Because you're thinking about deconstruction of buildings in the most sustainable way, and deconstruction rather than demolition, which is a beautiful way to put that I never even thought about, and has metaphors for so many other things. But that's where our worlds collide, right? Because then you're talking about asbestos or other things that are getting into the groundwater, and that's where environmental justice comes in, and like how are we properly disposing of things to make sure that things aren't getting into the groundwater that can be then toxic for these underserved and disadvantaged communities to then ingest. So that's why we, you know, all of us in the work say it's all cyclical, it's all coming back around, and it's all connected. So that's why both of our kind of pieces of the movement are just as important. One as important as the other. Um, so I'd love to ask you another question. How specifically does the reuse of lumber and other building materials help to reduce greenhouse gas emissions? You mentioned that a little bit, but if you could explain that more for our audience.
sure. So, like the average US home, I think, has 14,000 board feet of lumber, which
Okay.
is a lot. So when you think about how that lumber could be readily available because it already exists in the environment and it's like no longer serving its first intended purpose, um, it's a lot of wood. And even if you were to just put like a financial dollar amount to it, a dollar a board foot, that's $14,000.
Right.
I'd have to dig a bit deeper for the carbon that would be emitted from it, but it's not unsubstantial, and
Yeah.
especially with um, this old growth lumber. Um, it's been around for over 200 years, sometimes more than that.
Right.
And the kind of years or the centuries it would take for a second growth forest to like recoup all the carbon that old growth lumber, carbon dioxide already sequestered, is 200 years. Like it would take that
Mhm.
amount of time.
Mhm.
So again, it's reclaimed lumber is like the best green building solution, or one of them. I shouldn't say the best, because again, I'm sure there's something else out there, but it's readily available. And especially the old growth lumber, like it's got a strength and a resiliency that new lumber doesn't. So it does just inherently last a lot longer. You know, a 2x4 from a turn of the century building is a lot different in size, in weight, than a new one, because the trees are getting grown a lot quicker. They're getting cut down a lot faster.
Right.
So if we were to let our forests grow a little slower, use the lumber that we're harvesting naturally, or could be harvesting at a higher rate, it would be really interesting to see what would happen as a result of that in terms of emissions.
Right.
We just too much usable materials going into the landfill, and then as it rots, it releases that back into the environment, back into the air. It's very wasteful, and especially lumber that can be treated, can have all these, you know, a lot of times like 2x4s will come back to us and not necessarily be used as 2x4s, but be milled into flooring. That's still a more viable green building option than cutting down the tree, doing all the milling operations to get new floor. It's still a better option.
Right.
So
yeah, that's a good point. I wouldn't even think about, but should think about when it comes to like 2x4s being milled into flooring.
Yeah. We have to be creative in the way that we reuse materials, because a lot of building codes don't allow for perforated lumber to be used structurally.
Okay.
Even though
perforated lumber.
So it just means that like nails have already entered.
Oh, okay. Mm-hmm. Got it.
So it just means that we have to be creative with the ways that these materials can be reused. They absolutely can be reused structurally. Right. You just need a structural engineer to sign off on them. And I'm going to say like 99 times out of 100, the wood is like good to go, right? Mm-hmm. There's no issue. Right. But, you know, systems are set up to encourage, you know, industries that are successful.
Understood. Yeah.
But so we have to be creative, which is great. It just, you know, allows for really exciting projects. You know, we end up building a lot of furniture. A lot of our lumber goes back into renovations, restoration. So it's not full structural builds, but, you know, foundation repairs, wall repairs, siding repairs. Mm-hmm. We like to think about our materials as kind of being these like organ donors for other buildings, right? And especially the historic ones, using historic material that will inherently just last a lot longer, is much better for these old buildings than using new material.
Right. That's beautiful. So it sounds like every day is different for you all. You're working on specific projects, deconstructing specific buildings. You said that might take months sometimes. And can't we all learn to move a little bit slower? But what does if you could synthesize it, what does a typical workday look like for you and for y'all at over at Repurpose, Savannah?
Yeah. So I'm the director of the salvage part of our company. So we're kind of split into two. There's deconstruction and salvage.
Okay.
So like the beginning of my day involves like putting on my steel toe boots and going to the lumber yard, which is where we receive and process the vast majority of the building materials that come off of a deconstruction job site.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
So I will typically either go to the lumber yard or I'll go visit a deconstruction job site. When I first started with the company, I was like out in the field, like on roofs, taking stuff apart, and it was amazing. But I'm a little bit older now, and I've got a son, so I've got to be careful. But so I'd visit a decon job site to see what's happening, see what's getting harvested. Because again, if I can anticipate what materials are coming back, I can start finding homes for them immediately.
Oh, okay.
And because the materials are so varied occasionally, like every building we take down isn't the same.
Sure.
We're constantly getting different material, and I get to play like matchmaker. So I'm calling contractors, calling designers, calling architects, saying, hey, we're going to be getting this batch of 2x8 joists. Any interest? We can mill them. We could do this. And so I will go to the lumber yard to then kind of check on how our processing of what we already have in-house is going, and then check on custom orders. We have a wood shop. And so we are also kind of transforming these materials into things that people can, who like aren't necessarily restoring or buying a house or building a house, can access. And then I will check in with our sales department. It's one person. And see, you know, what deals need to be made, what products need to move. You know, we work with a lot of general contractors in town, but we're also really invested in working with affordable housing. So, you know, occasionally we're able to really reduce the price of our materials and get them into affordable housing projects, while also, you know, building a $6,000 custom table for someone who can pay for that. And that's great. But both things help us like navigate it all,
Right.
which is really wonderful. We salvage building materials, but we also salvage trees that come down. I'm just really love wood. You know, there are historic trees here too.
Right.
So we will get those delivered to our lumber yard and we'll process them, and they're really beautiful. And so again, like really usable carbon rich material that should not go rot in a landfill, like a live oak that's been up for 300 years.
Right.
We deserve better than that. So that's kind of a typical day. And then, yeah, I'll run a machine, or I'll work in the wood shop. I'll drive the forklift around. We wear a lot of hats. So I'm like managing people, but yeah, I like to get dirty too and make stuff. So
good for you.
Yeah.
Yeah. And you also, I mean, your bio, and also you kind of mentioned as an artist, being an artist. I love artists, don't we all? And so I think it's really beautiful to see when you can utilize those talents in spaces like this. So that's great.
I feel like taking a building down is like the best form of performance art.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's awesome.
Performing artist, yes, I can absolutely see that.
And I should mention too that like we're a really special company. Like I really love everyone that I work with. It's a really tight-knit community. We like trust each other. We rely on each other. Like what we do isn't easy. Like it's hard labor work to like take the building apart and pick this stuff up with your hands and your body, and processing lumber. Like you have to get all of the metal out of lumber, and that can be like a really grueling, painstaking job. And so I have to like give it up for the crew who like works in over 100-degree heat and like works tirelessly to do this. and like still comes to work, even though it's really hard. Because yeah, it's really wonderful that we get to work with these historic buildings. We also like learn the histories of the people that live there, and we preserve them. So on our website, you can see we document the histories of the buildings. We get them 3D scanned. So they're not lost. They can still be accessed. Yeah, just got a lot of reverence in what we do.
Yeah.
So
isn't it so important when we see what we do as important, regardless of where, sitting in a meeting room or if we're out, deconstructing a building. I think that is so important when it means something to us. And it's obvious that it means something to you all, and that's great. How can the Georgia climate community support the work that Repurpose Savannah is doing in the practice of more sustainable deconstruction, demolition, construction practices in our state?
Sure. Just say the word deconstruction a lot. Tell all your friends. If you have projects yourself, consider reclaimed secondhand building materials first. In Georgia, we're really lucky. There are a lot of pretty heavy hitters in the reclaimed secondhand building materials industry, like Life Cycle Building in Atlanta. Huge.
Yeah, love Life Cycle.
Super awesome. So I'd say like those are two great ways, but also getting involved in local policy. We are trying to pass an ordinance in Savannah that would make it illegal to demolish a building that's over kind of 50 years in age.
Okay.
In order to like get a demolition permit, you'd have to be evaluated, and if the building could be a viable deconstruction project, like that's what it needs to be. There are 6 cities that are doing it already. Portland was the first. They've been able to have huge impacts in their city. I mean, Portland has historically been like a really big kind of reuse community anyways. Like there's no reason why more cities, especially on the East Coast, couldn't do that. We would love Savannah to be the first city in the Southeast to have a deconstruction ordinance. It makes too much sense. There's so many benefits, like the environmental, the health, the cultural, and it creates jobs. Like, yeah. So just, telling your local officials about it, that you care about it, voting for people that support it. And then, yeah, if you hear that one of your friends needs to demolish something, be like, nope.
Right.
What about deconstruction? So,
yeah.
Cool.
So my last question, Kelley, and thank you so much for this, such a rich and eye-opening conversation that I absolutely identified with. What is giving you hope around climate solutions in our state? We both talked about being moms. You mentioned some of the work that you all are doing in Savannah and other states around the country that are working more on deconstruction.
Yeah.
What's giving you hope around climate solutions in our state? We know that things are looking a little rough nationally on so many fronts. We always like to end with a hopeful uptick in our conversation. I'd love to hear where your hope lies.
Sure. Right now. I spend a lot of my time just like working and doing the grind and like keeping my head down. But when I can like pop up and look around, I'm just seeing more businesses that have sustainability at the core of what they do.
Right.
And so, and it's mostly small businesses, I'll be very honest. So that gives me hope that like individuals are making a go for it and really believe in it. And so this like kind of an investment in more community-based projects, programs, businesses, like it feels as though, the lens is starting to maybe like narrow down a little bit, and people are starting to focus on what's around them and the people that they can kind of most directly impact. We have a few nonprofits in Savannah that really give me a lot of joy. Like Loop It Up Savannah is a nonprofit that, helps children, kids, and gives them like art supplies, and all of it's donated. And the after school programs are free, and they just do like incredible programming. And then there's a refillery in Savannah, right? So you can go there and like get soap in a bottle that you already have. It's like these small initiatives give me hope, but then, like on a larger scope, like the Inflation Reduction Act gives me a lot of hope. We're applying for a grant that's a part of that, the Trees Across Georgia grant. The Georgia Forestry Council gives me a lot of hope. They are investing a lot in urban forestry management and like the planting of more and more trees and training. So I'm hopeful, but there's still a lot to be done. There are, just continued instances where you look at something and you're like, man, you could have done that differently. But you just got to say like, next time we'll get it. Yeah. And we'll do it different.
Yeah.
What's giving you hope?
Yeah. No. We definitely will, especially with organizations like you all's. And I like to hear the uptick in people wanting to use reclaimed materials. I'm thinking about furniture pieces and things I have to get right now that I'm like, how can I, find something or buy something that is not, that is reclaimed. So I'll be doing my own research in order to do that.
Yeah. Come to Savannah.
Yeah, I should. Yeah. Thank you so much, Kelley, for your work. Thank you for your heart in this work. And thank you to Repurpose Savannah for the work that you all are doing. I really think it's really admirable. And as somebody who is really trying to reduce my carbon footprint and really trying to be less wasteful, I admire it deeply. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you all for watching, and make sure you hit subscribe on the YouTube channel so that you can make sure that you catch all of the new episodes of this Georgia Drawdown Climate Digest video series. Thank you again. Thanks, Kelley, again. And everybody have a good day.
Thanks.